Welcome to the Lost Signals Reviews, the American Film Institute's Top 100, where we critique the supposed 100 greatest American movies of all time. Join us as we decide if they're worthy of the Mott's Top 100.
Or Mott's. Hello, fellow cinemaphiles. The Lost Signals is back with another AFI movie, this time number 18, The General. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, and the South will rise again with Scott Thurlow.
Choo-choo.
Stephen Ramosi.
I want to get another train.
And Christopher Morgan.
Hello.
And as I said, we're doing The General, Buster Keaton pick, the movie that ruined him.
But then retroactively made him.
Yes, established his legacy. This is his magnum opus, if you will. And I'm going to start with a funny log line, if you shall call it so. Give me 10 Buster Keatons in this world, will be over tomorrow.
Our troubles here will be over very quickly.
Because, my God, is he the most effective Confederate
It's
soldier
literally a
I've
one-man
ever seen.
army, man. Like,
Yes.
Sure.
All right, so Scott, would you like to go tell us about how Buster Keaton won the war?
Indeed. So it is the South, and Buster Keaton is a train conductor / engineer who's just trying to live his life, trying to have a nice life with his girl, but unfortunately the war is on, so it's approaching his little area. He goes to enlist. They deem him more valuable as an engineer than an infantryman. So he's sort of dejected, and then very quickly, the North has a guerrilla little sort of brigade planning to commandeer a train and to sabotage the lines and to take their train into the supply lines and meet up with their greater army and greater forces. So they take his train, and him loving one of his two loves, aside from his Annabelle Lee, is the train. So he goes off in pursuit, and it's like basically a great train race, like for like about 67% of the plot. He's in pursuit of them, and farcical things happen. It has like a Charlie Chaplin-esque feel to it to a degree, like some of the bits and stuff. Like,
well, it's a silent film with slapstick comedy,
exactly. But
not as much as the people were expecting.
Exactly. The framework is he gets behind the lines, he has to rescue his girl, and then get his train back and warn the Southern forces that the North is approaching with a very large force and also supplies on the train. He does that. And they have a big battle, and the South happens to win this battle, mostly due to his heroic and brave efforts.
And if they had 9 more of them, they would have won the war.
They would have marched across the North. Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. It's a simple enough plot. Like, it's actually more involved than I kind of thought it would be. Mm-hmm. And I think I'll leave it to you guys, but I'll just say it here. You can expand, but it's based upon a true story. Like, a story actually happened where a train was commandeered by North forces, and the conductor, who was a Southern gentleman, and a couple of his fellow workers pursued the train and got it back. So yeah, like, it's pretty good overall. Score wise, I'm probably looking at a 2. I could be convinced of a 3. That it's very clearly like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. It's a shorter movie. It's like an hour and 40 or something like that. And I think it's very nicely paced out. Some of us here might disagree, but I thought it was fine. And yeah, like, given for what it is, adapted, and in this, the 1920s silent film era, and Buster Keaton writing and directing this version of it, or the story, it held together for me quite well. I was quite entertained, and you're right, while there was slapstick stuff, sure, it was also a serious story going on, as a framework, and I think that worked pretty well for me, so.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I was somewhat interested, like, right at the beginning, and then in the middle was probably, and I think Chris will agree.
A bit of a lull, you're saying?
No, I think the middle was maybe the best part.
Okay.
And the end, like, the last third of it, we'll say, up until the battle, was a little bit of like, all right, like, what are we doing with this?
It's a retread.
Yeah.
Padding. Yeah.
Exactly. It's kind of like what's happened, but in the opposite direction a little bit. And then they have this really pretty epic battle. We'll talk about all this stuff later, but I think it somewhat informs the plot. Like, the way that Buster Keaton wanted to film this movie had to do with how old Civil War photography was taken.
Mirroring the style there.
As you were saying earlier, Ian. And yeah, it does it does have a plot that makes sense. I'll probably give it a softer 2. I mean, I wasn't like enthralled with the plot by any means, but it held together, and I thought it was fine.
Yeah, that's all I'm pretty much saying. What do you think, Chris?
I'm probably looking at a 2. Probably not a very strong 2 because the last third of it, I felt there was a lot of retread. It kind of picked up steam a little bit towards the end. No pun intended.
That's the one you get for this one. Go ahead.
Narratively,
I see what you mean, though.
The thing is, I've seen a lot of silent movies where, like, narratively, it was more cohesive. Like, I was more interested in.
It wasn't like Duck Soup or something.
I was more interested. Oh God! Don't even get started.
Sound film. Though.
Yeah,
true.
But no, I was more interested in the machinations of what was happening, rather than why it was happening. If that makes sense, because I really wish there was a little more character development, because his girlfriend seemed a little superficial at the beginning, and it seemed a little slapsticky in a bit. I mean, like, I felt like some of the narrative got lost.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because this movie suffered from the fact that it didn't lean on vaudeville. It's actually a movie, they often say it's ahead of its time, but this is surely ahead of its time with attempting to give a really deep plot. And yes, it had to lean on the slapstick, the vaudevillian humor, because that's what is expected of Buster Keaton.
Right.
But a lot of people went in hating this movie because it wasn't a comedy.
It wasn't all just that. Yeah.
I think at this point in time, a very in-depth, almost, or when people were expecting the humor there.
Yeah, and I actually kind of wished they had leaned more in on the drama, rather. I mean, because I was really interested in the machinations. I thought it was amusing, but I really felt that narratively, I really wanted a little more meat, if that makes sense.
Well, so to build off this, they establish the characters. There's a chase scene. He ends up finding information, and then there's a reversal of the chase scene. And I think that we all kind of agree that the reversal of the chase scene, while I found at points interesting, it did retread a lot of literally the same tracks at times.
Yes.
That's the one you get to have for this one, right? Sure.
But it was, like, I don't know, overall, like, I'm going to give it a 2 overall, because it's just viewing it as compared to movies nowadays, but I can see, I feel that this is formative to the action-adventure romance
I agree.
archetype that developed, which, if you look at, like, Raiders of the Lost Ark, they have the female character is very superficial at times, but she's also, especially in the reversal scene,
just window dressing.
Yeah, she's active in attempting to thwart the dastardly Union soldiers trying to ruin the South's livelihood, as we all, I think, agree with here.
I don't know if I said that, but
I said it for you.
Uh-huh.
So
go on.
But, like, I think that a lot of, like, whether you're doing Raiders of the Lost Ark or Romancing the Stone, any of those kind of films, like, they owe a ton to this film.
Well, it's really funny because something you said before about the seriousness of the plot versus, like, the expectation on slapstick. Can you say that maybe some of the shorter comings of this film were due to studio meddling, executive meddling?
Oddly enough, no, because this was the last
he had
time
total creative
that he
control.
had total control. He was forced to sign with MGM after this, and in fact, it's ruined Buster Keaton for a long time, for a decade, because he did all his own stunts in this, and MGM, because he was contracted for like 9 movies or something like that, wouldn't allow him to do his own stunts anymore because he was.
The history behind the film is quite interesting.
It's fascinating, but this was the last time Buster Keaton was allowed to be an independent movie maker until I think the 40s.
Yeah. So, all that to say, like, my final thought was like, I think, it's good enough for a 2. I think maybe I'm cutting up the difference. Yes, Chris, it'd be nice if they, like, maybe cut out some of the unnecessary slapsticky vaudevillian parts of it, but I still think it works quite well overall. So maybe you're going to a softer 2, but still a 2. Me, stronger 2, but still a 2.
I think we all agree on 2.
Yep.
All right. Mr. Amosi, Tell us about what Buster Keaton was attempting to say with this film with themes.
I don't know. So there's like this.
Trains are awesome.
Yeah, trains are great.
Go on.
There's this theme of like, going after what you want, in terms of both literally chasing his train that was stolen from him, and which here's the other thing, like his fiance or whatever she is was kidnapped, right? And he didn't even know it until he found her in when he got to his train, when he caught up with his train, right? So I don't know what that means, but
I have something to say about it when you're done.
Theme. But I think that's kind of the big overarching thing that it's trying to do. That this movie is trying to do is like the power of one person, one man, when he decides to go after what he wants or whatever, which is fine. There's also unintended themes, I guess, of like black people don't exist in the South for some reason. Like in this war,
it's a sign of the times that the movie was made. Sure.
Yeah, sure, but he very specifically told a Civil War story without any representation for the main reason for Civil War.
Sure, you're right.
There are parts of this that are unfortunate. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that this is going to get a 1 from me, but I am interested to hear what you guys have to say about further in terms of what the explicit themes were.
So I was going to say something I don't disagree with what you said, but what I got up was it seemed to have an undercurrent of duty and honor, right? The whole point he goes to enlist and gets rejected because it's a farcical irony, dramatic ironies, because he's not allowed into the infantry because he's more valuable to them as an engineer, but in his mind, he's trying to live up to some idea that his fiance or his courtesan that he's talking to, right? So
that's what I was going to say.
He feels
duty, or is it he's just trying to get something?
Well,
right?
both. He feels compelled to. He certainly has an affiliation.
Isn't
as
that
a
why
Southern
men
gentleman.
do things?
Yeah,
though?
exactly.
Sure.
That's a funny point, but I'm just saying, I got that bit out of it to a degree. So I think maybe if it's not the most forceful or most prevalent theme, it's there to a degree. But I think it also intertwines with what you said, where one man can make a difference, and the right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world, I suppose. But something like that, right? So I think you're right. I'm not sure if it's enough for a 1. While I think those two things are the most obvious and most presented in the film, I don't know if it's necessarily the point of it. So I'm maybe leaning toward a soft 0, but not committed. So with that, I'll go to you guys.
I'm giving it to Ian because right now I'm giving it a 0.
So I'm going to be meta with this because I was actually very fascinated by the story behind this. It's based on a true story, and I find it interesting how much it lives up and doesn't...
and not quite follows.
How much it's fictionalized on top of that. Because Buster Keaton was obviously inspired by this chase that happened. And he attempts to avoid being political with this. But it is the story of...
For the most part, but sure. Because
I
of the
believe
setting.
it was the Great Train Chase or something.
The locomotive chase, I believe.
Yeah. And so he avoids that, but he's trying to stay true to the story and the aesthetic of that time. But what drove him to do this? And I think it goes that the drive of an individual who and how they can shape history by just sheer will. Again, I joked earlier about if there were 10 Buster Keatons, the South would have won. But honestly, that kind of
it
just
does sort of
willpower. If there were 10 of them, the South would have won in this universe. And they actually did win the battle just by the actions of one. Yeah. I think that idea of... I think Buster Keaton put a lot of himself into this work. Whether that is worthy of a 1 or not, I don't know. But I think that the vision of one, an individual following their passions. And I think that in a lot of ways, his girlfriend is actually second to that idea of his the train, the engine that drives him, and him reclaiming that. It's kind of mixed in with him building this movie as well, and this was his magnum opus.
Intertwined, yeah.
So again, is the narcissism and ego of a great man a worthy thing? Well, I mean, Citizen Kane is number one on AFI, and I think that that they share a lot of the same themes. Although Citizen Kane was dealing with a lot of the negatives of the drive, while this glorified it. But I don't know. That's my idea. I throw it out back to you guys.
Nah, so I'll answer a bit. Like, I think you might have convinced me on that angle. Like, I can see that coming through, and on that front, like, on that front only, I guess I'll say, I think I would give it a 1. And I maybe I'm just in general giving this movie more, like, in my mind, more credit just for its overall like meaningfulness to cinema and historically where it sits. But I think you're right. Like, it's like not quite the great man of history, but like a good man of history, like I said, like I referenced. So on that front, I might lean to a soft 1. So I'm kind of sitting there at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely catch your point, and I understand it. I don't think it's gonna be enough to change my score on this one.
That's fair. I don't begrudge that either.
I do like the argument. It's more. It's kind of down the same street that I was going down, but more in depth and I think more thoughtful there. I just am probably not gonna like. I don't know if it's enough depth for me to give it a 1.
Totally valid.
I'm gonna stick with my 0, but it's actually given me more
pause for thought,
praise for the other two other parts we're gonna get to.
Okay, very nice.
I might lean on. I was impressed by this film, or more. I was impressed by the idea of this film more than I was the film, and perhaps that goes in the theme. And I might detract later on for the 1 I'm giving it here.
Yeah. So we're splitting it to 1s, 2 0s.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice.
All right, Chris. I talk about these dirty Yankees.
Well,
The damn
I was
Yanks.
just about to say the damn Yanks. That's the that is our antagonist, and they served their necessity with regard to
As
the
such.
plot.
yeah.
I don't
I got
really
you.
think they had much gravitas, which I really want to speak more on, but I feel like I'm going to. This is a really interesting film that you brought up. There's a lot of meta aspects you brought up, Ian. And the thing is, and I'm going to say this now, Buster Keaton's earnestness, the fact that, he is telling the story. And I'm actually gonna say, like, any criticism I might have with regard to maybe plot or themes comes from the fact that I think he was trying to stay as far away from politics as possible and keep it to the facts.
Like a personal tale instead of...
Here's the North, here's the South. Let's discuss, as I said before, the machinations of what's going on rather than let's take a side as to any kind of morality play, so to speak. So the Yanks serve they serve their purpose insofar as they are integral to the plot to make the movie happen, but I don't really feel like they were much more than just a plot device.
See, one of my biggest problems with this is that he introduces 2 individuals to represent the Union here.
Exactly.
The spy master who's leading
He's
the
running
raid,
the ops,
and
essentially.
the general.
Yeah.
And if you put them in a lineup, I couldn't tell them apart.
You're absolutely right about that, sure.
And that's the thing, is that you don't introduce individuals to represent your villains and leave them as unmemorable as Keaton.
They might as well
did.
just be some random soldier anyways.
Yes. So I think that's the main issue I have with this.
It's tough too because, like, of course, like, because of the setting, because of the setup of it, it's like, yeah, the North is going to be, like, quote unquote the villain because that's who they're doing this entire
Rightfully so.
Who versus-
escapades against. Yeah, exactly. So, like, yeah, so in that sense, as you said, Chris, they're basically the device. Like, yeah, they're literally chasing him down, or he's chasing them the whole time. So, like, on a base level, of course, Buster Keaton's character feels antagonized by it. They still is one of his, the second most meaningful thing in his life, his train engine, and or the first, either one. But God,
But Scott, couldn't we also say that thermodynamics and entropy
sure.
are the villains of this?
I wasn't going to take it that far, but you could say that, yes. But as the film unfolds and as the plot tells us, again, it's like the forces of the North, the Union, right? So like it's tough because I'm actually still unsure that it works, of course, narratively, but you're right, like they all just sort of formlessly, facelessly merge into each other. But even if given the fact that they're still, again, literally in pursuit, like that's the whole action part
the
of
point
it.
to Chris, though, that they're just amorphous because they're not trying to be political. They become amorphous with
No, you're right. So
I think that's the biggest thing, right? Like in the vacuum of all the politics that were a very important part of any war, and specifically the Civil War, you get a faceless, almost boring villain. Like who gives a shit about them? Nobody remembers the Union soldiers. Nobody remembers the Union general. They remember Buster Keaton, and that's all well and good. But I'm not going to give the movie a 1 for antagonists on that role.
They work as a device, but not like anything beyond that. So
Is zeros all around?
Yep.
Yeah, I think you guys are right. I agree. Yeah.
All right, I'm on to protagonists here.
Buster Keaton.
And I think you just said it. You remember Buster Keaton. He's a phenomenal actor in expressing so much with his face, which is funny because he was known as Stone Face for his kind of
even
unflappability.
His body language as well. Yeah.
He sells it here. I understand his entire motivation in a silent film. Did a fantastic job. And you can absolutely tell he's passionate about the story he's telling, but more so, I think that drive.
He was invested in making this film, and making the character.
I have nothing but praise to give him for his portrayal, and he's a great slapstick comedian. Like the one scene where he's running over the hill to catch the train, and his girlfriend realizes that
she goes back.
That was a great game, for sure.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Like, so I think we mentioned it was written and directed by him, and like I think he had a clear vision and had a way he wanted to portray this character on film, on screen, and it worked really well. As you said, he's like the centerpiece, core focus, and memorable part of it, and did a great job. So I don't see how you cannot give him a 1 in this instance.
Yeah, I agree. He's, the glue of this movie.
Exactly.
As a character and as a director, and as I think he wrote it as well. This was, as you said, his passion project. As you said, his magnum opus. This was his passion project, and he's great in it. He's a terrific actor. He's, great at
presence, I'll say.
Yeah, he's got great presence, and he's a really impressive stuntman as well. On top of that, like all the stunts in this are
like that might be in the style, but you're absolutely right.
Terrifying, but pulled off really well, and I'm gonna give him a strong 1.
Yeah, he did a really great job. I think, Ian, you took the words out of my mouth. You said he's a phenomenal actor. I mean, the fact that he can convey so much. Beth and I were talking about another actor yesterday, and she, the actor or actress in particular, I always said she had an interesting face because she could change. You always talk about chameleon actors, and it's like they get lost in the role, and you don't need makeup or prosthetics. It's just the matter in which an actor.
Gary Oldman shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
some Gary Oldman shit.
But what I'm saying is, he had that. With regard to, like, when the movie first started, I'm like, because he had the pancake makeup and all that stuff. But as the movie went on, I was invested in his character. Yeah. I was invested in him. I found him a very interesting character to watch and a very interesting actor to watch. Mm-hmm. This is probably one of the 2 strongest ones I'm going to give it this review. He's phenomenal.
Absolutely.
I feel you. Yeah.
I mean, it all hinged on him.
Yeah. He's the showcase, and he's like the star.
Right. So Scott, on to supporting, which I think all hinges on the female character.
I agree, right? So like it's again a little bit tricky. So at first, like the movie actually did, as you said, ahead of its time to a degree, because going into it, like knowing the general zeitgeist of the era in which this film was made and in America, like I expected her just to be like, again, a little window dressing, like not contributing much, just there for the sake of it, just to have like, again, a small plot device for like motivation for him. But So she gets captured, of course. Like again, it's classic, like damsel in distress kind of shit. He rescues her, and then she could like they're partners in the little like in the rest of the chase and the scheme, and to get back and to warn the town where the garrison is stationed and all that. So like, while she may not have been characterized to a great degree, she was certainly more characterized than I expected, and that again, like that you generally see in films of this era with that kind of role. So I think, as you said, it does hinge upon that, and I think she leans over just enough for a 1, while everyone else is just, again, like, even the generals, you said, even the Southern general was, like, facelessly there, like, whatever, right? But I think she is the most important and impactful side character, so that's my argument / case to give it a 1 on that front. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly true. I saw this movie first. I saw this like 4 days ago, and I'm struggling to remember any of the characters really. Like you said, you could put the 2 Union guys in a lineup. I throw the Southern general.
That's
in
what.
there
Yeah,
too.
exactly right.
Like throw literally every other character. They're just old, like older white guys. Like except for the soldiers who are just younger white guys. Like I don't remember any of these fucking characters except for her. I think that she does a good job. It's going to be a soft one just because she is literally the only character, and she just tips over
Like
the
I
line,
said,
I think, into a
right?
1
You feel me?
territory of, like, she's a good supporting actor, and what I like about her character is she does do stuff like that. Like, they are partners when they go back, and, like, they're fucking bumbling partners, but like they bumble together, which is kind of nice.
Yeah,
like
exactly. It's endearing.
They have this like chemistry together.
Yeah.
She takes a lot of punishment. They're throwing that
She does a lot of
stuff in a sack, dude. Yeah.
Like that part was really impressive. Like she's like climbing over the fucking train and shit. Like at the same time as him, like they're going back and forth.
For sure.
Like she does a lot of stunts too that are like maybe not quite as dangerous as the ones that Buster Keaton's doing, but like
they in a
she
cakewalk.
can definitely get hurt. Yeah. So I'll give her credit for that. I think that the character's name is
Annabelle Lee. Poe reference, or at least I took it as such. But yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give that a 1 just for her.
I'm going to say this now, even though it probably belongs more in style, but I think Buster Keaton would be like the perfect A24 director. No, because the reason I'm saying is because she was not a character I liked until she got involved, but when she gained gravitas, I don't want to take anything away from her because it's like, I don't want to be like, all right, well, he brought her into light, but she gained gravitas. Like, I felt like it's like the problem I have with this film. I feel like you would look at something and you would see the slapstick, but to me, Keaton had such an interesting face. That's what I said before. He's so expressive. So when you got her involved, he brought her, he elevated her. I mean, like, in other words, anytime
I think they complemented each other.
They complement each other. That's the word I'm looking for. So prior to the point where he rescued her, I would have given her a 0. But I think especially for the time it was impressive. But I think she really did have some gravitas. And again, I think as an actress, she really got to show her chops, so to speak.
Yep. It's a pity that this didn't do. She retired after this film.
Oh, really?
Because it was so poorly received. Yeah. Which is an unfortunate act of history, but vindicated by us.
Yes, and I think that overall, especially
Just
compared to other portrayals of women in the similar era.
At the time, yeah.
Now, granted, like Charlie Chaplin also had somewhat kind of strong, but in a different way than this was. It's almost an action girl. Proto-action girl. In a way.
Yeah,
for sure.
I have to give it credit for that because this is a character you've seen later, but you haven't seen prior. So,
and I think comparing her to Marion from Raiders of the Lost Ark was a good.
Yeah, I mean, like I think you can clearly see like the sort of not family tree, but like the lineage of it, like where it starts and then tendrils. Yeah. So I think one's a good call on that.
Steve-O, we're talking about silent films, so talk about dialogue.
This is an interesting question. I didn't find there is dialogue cards, right? So that's the dialogue. I didn't find it to be all together super compelling. It moved the story forward.
It was exactly as serviceable as it needed to be.
That's the thing. Like, I hate to say it, but like, perhaps if it was spoken, it would be better. But because it's on cards, and so divorced, like the way just the way that silent movies with
it's all matter
cards,
of fact.
It's so divorced from the action that's taking place on screen. A lot of times that it just doesn't usually do it for me in terms of dialogue. Now, I don't know, maybe you guys will say something that'll change my mind, but I don't think I'm going to end up giving this a 1.
Now, that is all true. However, I'm going to present the Lost Signals reviews other silent movies because it's visual and body lead dialogue, if you will, like, right?
Sure.
So, yes, of course, the cards, like, if just rating the dialogue, the words that are shown to you on screen that or is what the characters are supposed to be speaking, yeah, it's flat because that's how it always mostly is. But again, their chemistry, their interactions, I think their expressions count, and we have done it before, count as a sort of dialogue unto itself because of the nature of silent films. And I think this one was quite top notch. Like, even when he's talking to say, like, he goes to visit her, Annabelle Lee, early before the war comes to town, right? And he's in, like, her parlor, and her father's there. Like, they have, like, an interaction there. Like, you could see, like, the energy, I guess I want to say, on the expression, again, on people's faces and their body language. I think that all counts to a style or type of dialogue, which, for me, worked quite well. So that's my argument to give it a 1 on that front, in that angle.
I'm going to build on what Scott said. Sorry, Steve. I'm going to build on what Scott said, and I'm going to give the actress I was referring to before was Michelle Hurd from. Sorry, I'm not doing this to troll you guys.
It's cool.
But Star Trek Picard. But getting to, I know, but I purposely didn't bring it up, but now I have to because I'm building on Scott's point. The fact that Buster Keaton does so much. He's got such an interesting face and it's so expressive, and it astounds me, like, as much of as a gray area as this movie is in a lot of ways for me. It's just what propelled me was, Keaton. And
Sure.
how, and as I was complimenting last night about Michelle Hurd, was that he's got such an interesting face and it's so expressive. He doesn't need to do much to change. And when Annabelle Lee was with him, again, he brought her in under that umbrella, and she changed too. I have to give this a 1 because if I don't, it is then going to make me a hypocrite on every compliment I'd given before. And again, I did not bring it up to troll you guys. I purposely didn't, but I was just having this conversation last night, and having a silent film with these two, and especially Buster Keaton, really kind of proves the point.
I'm going to give it a 0 here because of the exposition dumps in text that they give. And I also feel that, granted, there's some distance removed here, but reflecting on other silent films that we've seen, I think this had poorer dialogue cards than ones who came before. Granted, nothing to take away from their stylistic or chemistry between the two.
But you're shoving that into style pretty much.
I'm just deducting a point here for that.
I would entirely agree with you. In fact, I would go a little bit, not necessarily further, but like a separate point where I wish that this movie, to your point about a lot of the like dialogue being, body language, things like that. I agree that exists.
I'm saying we've done it before. It was my only basis for doing it that way. So.
And we've done it with talkies too.
Yeah. So good.
Sure. But I agree that exists. But I think that this film would be better for not having dialogue cards.
It's fucking tough.
I actually agree with you.
Doing body
I
language.
absolutely
Because
positively agree with you on
because
that.
I would, and to the point that you just made, Ian, about the exposition dumps that they did in cards, I knew what was going on in all those scenes.
You got the gist of it for sure, even without it. Yeah.
And then they would just like dialogue card, and they would be like, and it seemed a lot like the dialogue cards were happening more often in this film than in other silent films that we've seen, like Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, I was
up and
Charlie
down.
was more pointed with his dialogue cards.
Right. And like I think that the dialogue, the body dialogue, I guess we'll call it, whatever, for lack of a better term, is good in this movie, but I think it gets to a point ruined by the dialogue card dialogue. And I think I'm gonna stick with a 0 for those reasons.
I'm gonna flip to a 0.
Steve,
you guys got me.
You're absolutely right. The dialogue cards were the thing I was least amount interested in. So bravo, I'm giving it a 0 as well.
Good job for you guys.
So Chris, tell us all about how Buster Keaton handles style.
There's I look at some of these shots, and I know how we do it today. I mean, all right, I know how we do these shots today if we have real filmmakers using practical rather than CGI.
Uh-huh.
And back then, they had practical. I mean, you could tell back then what was rear screen projection and what was actual. And I'm sitting here going, in my head, I'm trying to figure out how the fuck did they do this shot?
Yeah.
So cinematography, just based on the cinematography alone, it gets a 1. Keaton's acting, and the fact that a lot of the slapstick that he had, and the first, like I said, we all agree that the second train in reverse was felt a little
overextended.
Yeah, but the first time, his actions didn't seem slapsticky. They felt like they had a purpose. They were very logical. And aside from that fact, it's just back then you could see the wires.
So sometimes they were both they were slapsticky, but he was doing practical.
Yeah.
Well, he was doing his slapstick for a reason, right?
Sure, yeah.
Right, but I could definitely tell when they used rear projection and when they used practical.
Sure.
And the majority of this was practical. I could tell right away when they were doing models and when they weren't doing models. This film had a lot of practical stuff. Like when they broke when they blew up the bridge and broke the dam at the end, and I thought they were miniatures at first. I mean, it might have been a mixture of miniature plus, but when the Union soldiers got flooded out, I'm like, well, that's definitely there's a certain amount. Even today, you really can't. I don't know if today is bad.
Can't fake everything.
Yeah.
Seeing that bridge get blown up and the train falling in.
Yeah. The style of this film is absolutely magnificent. And the fact that it still holds up today, the fact that the effects on this are better than some of the CGI bullshit we see today is better. This film gets, the style of this film gets such a strong 1 from me because it is just magnificent. And as a side note, every time I kept thinking of the train, I kept thinking of the Mummy or discussion last year with the train.
All right.
But no, but seriously, that was an intentional digression because I literally thought about that several times during this film.
Alrighty,
but the style of this film is great. Cinematography is outstanding. The effects were incredible. Yeah, I can't. I'm going to heap a lot of praise on style because it was phenomenal.
Yeah, you said a lot of it. I'm going to leave one thing for you to say, but agreed, the style is fucking amazing and it holds up. And if nothing else, you can appreciate it visually, viscerally and visually for what it is. And yeah, I don't have much more to add. Just it's along with him as the protagonist, it's probably the strongest one of the whole thing. So
the music was great throughout this, and a silent film is. Often what fascinates me about silent films is a lot of times different theaters would have different musical scores that have an organ playing. Yeah. So actually, there's a place called Lowe's Theater that still shows silent films, and they have an organ there, and you can watch a organ player do. But regardless, on that point, Buster Keaton is a phenomenal physical actor, and
for sure.
It's impressive to watch him do his stunts and how meticulous they are. He's very famous for, I believe it's in The Cameraman. I might be wrong about that, but it's when the side of the house falls down upon him. He actually had to nail down his shoes to get the spot right so that he didn't move, and they just dropped a house down around him. But he suffered for his art. Jackie Chan gets a lot of credit for doing it to himself. Buster Keaton
was doing it 80 years ago. Sure.
And him climbing around that train. One last thing I want to talk about is early on when he's driving, they have the retreat and then the advance of the Union Army. and the juxtaposition between his actions on the train and what's going on behind it, absolutely phenomenal. I was very impressed by that scene. Oh, and the last battle scene too was one of the best battle scenes I've.
It's some Game of Thrones shit.
Yeah,
again, a century before Game of Thrones.
Huge. Yeah, that was enormous for like I don't know what their, how much money they had to make
extra budget was or whatever.
I think it was about $750,000 at the time.
That's a huge budget.
Yes,
but it was that scene was fucking crazy. And I give him credit. Like the one thing that I remember watching is when he's sitting on the cow catcher in the front of the train, and he has the giant
beam,
and he has to throw
that's
it
what that's why I was referencing
out of
earlier.
The way. Like, motherfucker, you better get this right because if you don't, you're not gonna have a good time.
That's like the hardcore slapstick practical thing I was saying, but for sure, good example.
Like that shit. I don't know. That blows my mind. Like everything that you both mentioned, the cinematography, like his acting, amazing. His slapstick, really good. Like his physical presence in this, amazing. But his direction in this movie is phenomenal. Like the shots that he gets, he's in charge of seemingly in charge of every aspect of this film, and
every scene of painting
really nails all of it.
But the research he put into
that's what I was leaving for you to say.
Making this into a Civil War epic.
Yeah,
when I don't think anyone came in expecting it to be
right.
Yeah, is
and like you mentioned, he used the same lenses that they use on
same filter.
Civil War photography, things like that.
Yep.
Anyway, it's a strong one. I think it's gonna be a strong one for all of us.
Yep,
right?
for sure.
Okay, and it's on to me with recommendation. Yes, I think if you are into film, this should be one you see. Really, this is new to the AFI, and I understand why they put it in. It's Orson Welles' favorite films and inspired him in his work. And I think that if you are serious about film, this is something you should see because of how influential it is. And it's a good movie.
That's what I say. I think it works both ways. Sure, if you're a cinemaphile, you should definitely see it. You probably have. And it still holds up. It should definitely be in the AFI. I would say, even the spot it's at is perfectly fine. And even if you're not as being to it, it's an enjoyable, one of the best silent era of films that I've seen. Even us being more into it, academic, if you will, about it. I think it works on both fronts, and I absolutely recommend it.
I might like Chaplin better, but I think
it's
I also
really close.
I got into Chaplin before. It's the first Buster Keaton work I've ever seen full length.
Sure.
So I might be biased on that sense.
But still, I think it holds up. It's as good, as all the good Chaplin shit. So
I have I don't know. This is an interesting question. Would I recommend it? I think it's a really well made movie. Especially ahead of its time in terms of production and that type of thing.
Vision, we'll say, yeah.
Yeah. I think there are some unfortunate implications to this movie.
Sure.
Which there are definitely people that I would not recommend it to.
Let's not disregard that. You're right about that, but still.
I think if you're going to watch this movie, watch it from a technical perspective and things like that. That's the thing. Watching this in 2020, it's very weird for me that at a time 70 years after the Civil War, they made a Civil War movie about the South, about a South victory where the Union soldiers are the bad guys, and it completely glosses over all political parts of the Civil War.
Sure.
Right? I just don't understand why this was the movie that he wanted to make as his magnum opus. Granted, he did all the technical parts of it really well. I think I would probably recommend this movie to less than half of the people that I know that would watch
that
movies.
Might want to care.
I think any big cinephile who really wants to dig into the history of movies should watch this from a academic perspective.
I agree with that.
You know? But
I feel like
I wouldn't be
that.
oh, you like
point.
movies? Go watch The Fucking General tomorrow. I wouldn't do that. So I think I'm gonna give it a 0.
So you're saying you wouldn't recommend Song of the South either?
Correct. Song of the South.
Jesus.
Fuck it. There are any number of movies that I would not recommend for the same reason.
All right. What do you think, Chris?
Steve pretty much said everything I was going to say, save for one thing. this is a film I said at the beginning of the night that I appreciate more than I like. I
get you.
I would go back and watch it to see the technical
For
aspects.
aesthetic value.
Yeah, I will go back and watch and appreciate the aesthetic value, but it is not something I would say it's a film I'd go out and recommend tomorrow. So I'm right with Steve. I just really
Softer Zero, but still.
Yeah, I really
Gotcha.
I really want to highlight my appreciation for the film.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well,
does it leave
without
us?
further ado, that leaves us with, well, Scott and myself, because we're Confederates at heart, gave it a 7.
I never said that. Go on.
Just
I didn't agree to this.
drag him down with you. E.
And these Yankee fools over here, Stephen Ramosi and Christopher Morgan, gave it a 5 each, which gives an aggregate score of 6, which is
I feel like it's a little low, but it's still fine.
It's fair enough for being a problematic. So we each deducted a point for plot.
We split up.
We didn't like the antagonist, nor did we like the dialogue. But where Scott and myself agreed, and those two didn't, is recommendation and themes, which
It could have gone either way. Like,
Yeah.
it was close.
because Scott Thurlow and I will give it a rebel yell here with Scott Thurlow,
And Johnny comes marching home again. Hurrah.
Stephen Mosi,
Choo choo.
and Christopher Morgan.
She cried more.
And we'll see you next time. Good night.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Ramosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.